Okay, right now we are a ship from NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is off the coast of California, and they're studying one of the least explored places on Earth, the deep ocean. We're able to connect with the ship through satellites and what's called telepresence. We're here at the Exploratorium. My name is Mary Miller. I want to welcome the schools that are here today. Are you guys excited? Yay! So I'm your host today, and I think we're ready to connect with the Reuben Lasker. We're going to be talking with Tom Laydick, who's a research biologist and a fish expert at Southwest Fisheries Service in Santa Cruz. So I'm going to ask right now, Tom, can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you. Hi, we're out here on the Reuben Lasker, just studying those fishes and corals that you've been talking about.
So Tom, we'd like each of you to introduce yourselves and what you do on the ship Reuben Lasker.
Sure. So I'm Tom Laydick, and I'm the chief scientist here. I kind of basically run operations. All these people around me do all the work. No, I mean I study the fish. I help them in all the video transects, and that's it. Go ahead, Meredith.
I'm Meredith Everett. I'm a geneticist at the Northwest Fisheries Science Center, and I work on deep sea corals and sponges, doing identification and studying how populations of deep sea corals are connected to one another.
And my name is Lizzie Duncan, and I work for the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, where I'm a research operations specialist, and I help co-coordinate with Meredith the West Coast Deep Sea Coral Initiative. Oh, and on this cruise, I help sample or process the samples that come up, and I'm also the point of contact for a lot of the education and outreach activities that we're doing, like today.
So, Tom, can you tell us a little bit about what it's like out there right now on the Reuben Lasker and what you've been doing for the last, 24 couple days?
Yeah, so we're out here. There's 35 of us on this ship. It's 200 feet long. So imagine having 35 people all stuck together. We have two vehicles. We have the AUV, the autonomous underwater vehicle that works mostly in the daytime hours. It's out right now. It's doing a mission. Then it comes back, and then we set up for the ROV, the remotely operated vehicle, and we sample basically from about 4 p.m. to sometimes about 2 p.m. in the morning, and then the ship moves, and we go to the next site. And so the last couple of days we have been along the central coast. We were at Carmel, and then we moved down to Point Sur, and right now we're sitting off of Morro Bay in this area where we're surveying for a potential wind farm that might be put in here.
So, Meredith, Tom mentioned, and we've been talking a little bit about the ROV. So I wonder if you could describe to us a little bit about how you work with the ROV. Start with the launch. It goes through the depths of the ocean to reach the bottom. And we have some video we're going to show that shows some of the animals that you see on the way down, including a comb jelly. So can you talk a little bit about the journey the ROV takes and what it finds when it reaches the bottom?
Absolutely. So when we get set up to launch, the pilots and the ship crew work carefully together to put both vehicles, the ROV Yogi and Guru, over the side, and then they begin their descent through the layers of the ocean. And as they go down, it gets darker and darker, and we need to use the lights on the vehicles more and more to see what we're seeing on the cameras. And they do run those cameras all the way to the bottom. And so on the way down, we're able to get a view of all the animals that live in what we call the pelagic environment, which is that open ocean environment off the seafloor. And we'll see comb jellies like the one you're going to be seeing in the video. So that we would call that a ctenophore, and those are really abundant. And the little waving iridescent combs you can see are what give them their name and help propel them through the water. We've also seen squid, 2 or 3 different types of squid in the midwater as we traverse down, and little lanternfish we'll call myctophids. And they're a really important part of the pelagic food chain. A lot of things like to eat them. And they have little bioluminescent spots under their eyes and along their bellies. And so we go deeper and deeper in the ocean, following the ROVs down, and the pressure gets higher and higher. And the two ROVs have a lot of special equipment on them that allow them to deal with that pressure. And then they finally get to the seafloor, where they settle out, and the pilots take some time getting adjusted, and then we start to get that camera feedback of what we see on the ocean bottom, whether it's mud or corals or sea pens and deep sea fish. And we start running transect lines where we can see and count the number of animals, and then we use the manipulator arm on the vehicle. The pilots steer it for us, and they'll reach out, and we tell them, yes, I would like to take that sample, and they'll use the hand on the end of the arm to pick up a sample and stow it in the basket, and then bring it back to the surface where we can study it aboard the ship.
Great. Lizzie, I have a question for you. You work for the NOAA's National Marine Sanctuary, which protects sea life. It's a place where sea life is protected. Why is it important to protect sea life on the bottom of the ocean? What is it about the bottom habitats that's important for us to study and important for us to preserve?
Yeah, absolutely. So sanctuaries are a type of marine protected area, and one of the special things about sanctuaries is that they do protect the seafloor, like you mentioned. And the reason that's important is because there's a lot of structure-forming organisms that live down there, such as the deep sea corals and sponges that you've been discussing and that we've been surveying out here with our ROVs. So the structure that these organisms provide are used by other species that are important to humans, such as commercially fished species, such as rockfish. We have crabs that live out there. Elasmobranchs like sharks often lay their eggs on deep sea corals and sponges. And so places like sanctuaries prohibit certain kind of human activities that could disturb the seafloor. And a lot of these structures and these animals are really long-lived, slow-growing, and slow to mature. And so if they were to be disturbed or damaged, it takes a very long time for them to recover. And so protecting them and conserving them is important.
Great. So Meredith, in the last video clip we showed, we see fish, but it's not just fish that are down there. We saw some sponges and some coral. But on the sandy bottom from a dive that happened on Monday night, we saw this kind of slender-looking, strange-looking animal that I think is called a Cpen. Can you describe what kind of animal the Cpen is, and also a little bit about how you study them, not just with cameras, but how you collect samples and then bring them back to the lab?
Absolutely. So Cpens are actually one of my favorite corals, even though they live out in the mud. So they are a coral, even though they look kind of like a feather quill. If you look really closely, you'll see they have little individual polyp animals that have 8 tentacles, and that puts them in the octocoral family. And they live in soft bottom habitats. So the areas where we don't have that rocky structure, you'll often find these big groups of Cpens. And sometimes fish will come and lay next to them. And little baby fish will sometimes live in the fronds of the Cpens. So they're still important habitat. Now, I really like looking at these, but it's really hard to tell what they are sometimes when we're looking in the camera. Some of those red ones you see in the video, we actually were going back and forth on the ship about what kind of Cpen they were. And for us, the only way to really tell is to sample one and bring it back to the surface. So we had the ROV team reach out and pick one up off the seafloor and put it in the box. And we brought it to the surface where we've been able to identify it. It's a species in the genus Funiculina, and it's really common down there, and it's really good for us to be able to get a nice up-close view of it on the surface. When we get it into the wet lab, we take photos of it on the deck, and we take measurements, and then we preserve it. And when we preserve it, that specimen is actually going to go and live at the Cal Academy Museum, and that way other researchers will have the opportunity to work on it as well.
Great. So, Tom, we've been seeing some of the beautiful footage and how the ROVs collect samples, but I have a question for you about how is the ROV controlled? I know you're kind of sitting at a place where the pilot sits, so can you point out some things and tell us how you control the ROV and how scientists work with pilots to collect samples and to look at things that are important?
We're actually in this part of the ship that's called the Acoustics Lab. It's kind of a long room, and we're at this, the pilots are at this end of working the ROV, and us as scientists, we're on the other end, and we have a bank of monitors. But here's where we have the monitors for all of the ROV to look at. They can get an image of what's going down on the seafloor. They can see what's going on in the back. Each of the vehicles, the ROVs that are underwater, have multiple cameras so they can get different views. Like last night, we were looking at the tether, the line that attaches one of the higher ROV to the lower one, and we could see how it was floating to make sure that we didn't run into it. Then in front of us right here is the control panel. So everybody who loves video games with joysticks, this is basically a gamer's dream. You get to run it. You can basically go forward, backwards, sideways with these controls. You can move up and down with these controls and forward. Then there's all these different options that you have. When it's in the water, these monitors right here will look sort of like this one here, which you can't really see too well, but it's basically all the different electronics that on it, and they can enable and disable the thrusters, which are the way it moves. We have parallel lasers on there, so you can see the two red dots on the screen, which when you have that up, you can see on the footage, and you may have it there. They're 10 centimeters apart. It allows us to measure fish. And so we're all on headsets, and so we talk to each other continuously. We have one side, the pilots will have that channel, and the other side, the scientists will, so we can be talking separately, or we can be talking to each other, and that way we can communicate as they're taking all this equipment. So this is one of the ROVs. This is the bottom one, Yogi, and this one over here is the top one, Guru. So they're both running at the same time, and then the navigator sits here because we got to know where we're going. So we have 3 people who are running the ROVs at one time, and then you can't see it, but behind me is another whole bank of monitors that shows the ocean conditions, the depth, all sorts of electronic readouts so they can understand whether the ROVs are working properly or not.
Great, thank you. I'm going to see if there's anybody in our audience today that has a question. We'll have another opportunity, but if you have a question, if you want to raise your hand, we can get you a microphone, or you can think of your questions. Oh yeah, there's a question right here, and then we'll go to a question there. So hold on, the microphone is getting to the student with a question right here, the blue shirt. Okay, speak into the microphone and ask your question.
Who are the people behind the monitors there?
Who are the people behind? Oh, are there other people there with you in the ship? The question is about who are the people. We can see people through the monitors.
Yes, and the one right now through the monitor is Roland. He is actually probably the most special person on the ship right now because he is the videographer, the one who is basically sending these images to you and controlling it all. And he also controls the telepresence. And when we send out the video out into space through that satellite dish, he's the one who controls that. And without him, you would be seeing none of this. So.
We have another question right here in the front. If you hold on a second, we'll get that question.
Have you ever visited anywhere else, like the Mariana Trench or anything?
So what other special places have you been to do your research in the ocean?
Well, for me, I pretty much studied just along the California and Oregon coast. So I've been diving for the last 30 years, doing subs and ROVs and looking at different aspects of the ecosystems down there. Meredith, where have you been?
I've had the opportunity to do work all the way from Nia Bay, Washington, all the way to Southern California, down by San Diego, just like this cruise. And through telepresence, I've been able to collaborate on work that's gone on in the South Pacific, although I have never been on a ship out there yet.
I've also have the opportunity to study up and down the West Coast on ships like these, doing ROV work from Washington all the way down to San Diego, usually in cruises like these. But I believe our ROV crew have been lots of places too. So bringing us all together, we all have various experiences that we get to draw from to bring our expertise together. So that's a good observation.
Great, thank you. We have one more question, then we're going to move on, but we'll have an opportunity later. How about this young lady up front?
The picture of the Cpen that you showed us, is it enlarged or is the Cpen really that big?
Yeah, can you tell us how big the Cpen is? Because on the screen it looked really big.
Yeah, we actually have that same experience where on the screen things will look really big, and then when we get them off the ship, they're actually usually much smaller. So that Cpen was only about this long once we got him to the surface, so much, much smaller when we get him to the top. And part of that's because they actually shrink all the water out of their tissue, but part of that's just it looks so big to us on the big screen, and that's why it's important to have those lasers to kind of give us a perspective about how big things really are.
Great. So the places that you've been studying off of Morro Bay are potential sites for offshore floating wind farms. For the audience here, we have a diagram that shows the turbines on the ocean and how they generate energy from wind, and then that energy is the electricity goes through a cable to the shore, so we can use it in our own homes and our businesses. We have another illustration that's showing wind turbines that are close to shore. It just shows how there's different attachments. Some of them are floating and they're tethered to the bottom, and other ones are on more of a kind of stanchion, or they're connected to the bottom. When you're in the deep sea, you need to be the floating, tethered kind. So those are just two kinds of turbines. And what the ship now is studying is where are places where those kind of wind farms can be placed. So I have a question for Lizzie. The area right now is not part of a marine sanctuary that you study, but there's a reason that you're surveying to make sure that the habitats that that potentially could go in won't be harmed. So why aren't wind turbines in sanctuaries? What are you looking for on the surveys that you're doing to make sure that we're finding the best place to put this offshore wind energy?
Sure. So what we're looking for with these visual surveys with the ROVs and the AUV on board, we're looking to see if there is the proper habitat for tethering some of these turbines. So that might be hard habitat for the deep sea turbines. So we're trying to make sure we know where the deep sea corals and sponges are, so that way if this is a potential area for offshore wind energy, that once that construction goes in, they're not going to be harming areas that are really abundant and diverse with life. We're hoping for places that seem to be less populated with these organisms, so we're doing the least amount of damage to them as possible. And we're also looking for any kind of geohazards, so just the proper place to do this kind of construction underwater. And one of the reasons why marine sanctuaries may not be the best place to put them, as I mentioned earlier, national marine sanctuaries all prohibit seafloor disturbance. So that's constructing on the seabed or alteration of the seabed. And that's because we want to protect deep sea corals and sponges. There are 5 sanctuaries on the West Coast, and they all prohibit that kind of human activity, and they all contain deep sea corals and sponges within their boundaries. So that's the main reason, or one of the reasons that they exist, is to protect that kind of sensitive, vulnerable habitat at the bottom of the seafloor. And so certain activities could be permitted through sanctuaries. However, a project of this size would probably be too large and could cause too much damage to places that we're trying to protect and conserve those kinds of species of deep sea corals and sponges. And so off of Morro Bay, where there isn't a sanctuary, this could be a good place. It needs high wind, it needs the right kind of seafloor bottom, and we're looking to make sure that in certain areas that, you know, hopefully there aren't as many deep sea corals and sponges in place. So if that were to go through, we could direct them to good places to do that kind of construction.
So I just want to mention that we're talking live to a ship at sea off the Morro Bay, the Reuben Lasker. We're talking to scientists who are currently on an expedition surveying the deep sea for possible sites for wind energy, but also just so we understand more about the deep sea. It's very, very mysterious. So because we are so close to Halloween, we wanted to ask each of the scientists on board if they could be dress up as any animal, any scary animal in the deep sea, what would you be? And we're going to start with Tom.
So one of my favorite animals is actually a scary one, and it's called a fangtooth. It's basically a kind of oval-looking fish that's black, and it has huge teeth. And just when you look at them, they're pretty scary, but it doesn't even get as big as your hand. So it's a small fish, but it's pretty scary looking.
Meredith, can you tell us about your animal, the Pacific black dragon?
Yeah, so the Pacific black dragon's another deep sea fish. We've actually gotten to see 2 of them so far on this expedition, which is really cool. But they're long and thin, and they have bioluminescent tummies and a barbel under their chin that they use to help hunt for their food, and big teeth. They're a really neat fish.
Cool. How about you, Lizzie?
The animal I chose is another deep sea fish, similar to Tom and Meredith's choice in terms of where they live. I chose a Deepsea Anglerfish, where, again, they don't get very big, but if you see a close-up picture, a lot of them have very big mouths, very big teeth, and they have a lure that comes out the top of their head that can bioluminesce to attract prey who think it's a yummy snack, only to find out that actually, maybe not.
All right, so I also want to share my favorite animal. It's not very scary. In fact, it's completely, totally adorable. It's the Dumbo Octopus. It doesn't have 8 legs, but it has really big, googly eyes, and it swims with fins on the top of its head. This is also an animal in the deep sea, and if I could have a perfect costume, it would be the Dumbo Octopus. So I wanted to see if there's any other questions from the studio audience before we let our scientists go. We have some questions. Oh, we got so many questions. We got a question in the back. Let's go to the back. So talk in the microphone.
Have you ever encountered a goblin shark?
They want to know if you've ever encountered sharks out there.
So yeah, we haven't seen a goblin shark because they're pretty deep and we're limited on our depth with this ROV. But we have seen other sharks. One of the most common is called a cat shark. We see them at these depths. They get about 3 feet long, so they're not very scary, but they're very abundant, and they leave their egg cases all over the place. So we see those more often. And then about 2 weeks ago, we saw a blue shark that came in between the 2 vehicles and got caught on camera. So we do see them occasionally.
If you discover a new sea creature, do you kill it or do you put it back in the ocean?
Oh, what do you do when you discover?
That's a great question. Okay, so I'll just take it. And basically, when we find something new, it depends on how many of them we find. If there's one individual, a lot of times we will not take it, because if that's the only individual we find, we don't want to kill that one. But more often than not is when we find one, we'll find a few of those type. And then if it's like a coral, we will sample that coral and we'll bring it up to the surface then you can actually do a lot of under the microscope kind of identification, because video is not as reliable to making sure it's a new species. And once we know it's a new species, we actually give it to specialized scientists who are called taxonomists, who will work out all the details, and then they will describe it and make it a new species.
What made you want to study the ocean?
One of you guys can go.
Yeah, I'll take a swing at this first. I grew up in the Central Valley, and my family would take one vacation a year, and we would always go to Cambria or Cayuga, somewhere on the Central Coast, and I just enjoyed those experiences so much. When I went to college, I found out that you could major in marine biology, and I fell in love with all of the coursework, the field work, and that's just the path I've stuck to ever since, and I have not a single regret.
Stand by for another question.
Do you guys know how deep does the ocean go?
I can take that one. So it depends on where you are in the ocean. The majority of the ocean has what's called the abyssal plain, which is about 6,000 meters. So that would be about 18,000 feet. But there are places like the Mariana Trench where it can get even deeper, down to about 12,000 meters, which is many, many, many miles down. And those are the deepest parts of the ocean. But the majority of the ocean is about 6,000 meters. And then there are mountain ranges in the ocean where it comes up shallower. We have one of those off the Pacific Northwest coast of the U.S. on the Juan de Fuca Ridge, and there's one in the middle of the Atlantic called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. And then we have the coastal zones where it comes up shallower. So where we're working to about 1,200 meters and shallower.
How many species of fish have you found?
So I'm just trying to think about it. We've seen probably about 100 different species so far on this cruise.
Another question. Let's stand by.
Have you ever seen any rare or never discovered creatures?
The real answer to that is yes, because we see a lot of little organisms that aren't collected very often, and so I'm sure that we see things that are never described. We don't know, but since we don't collect all those, we just see them, and so it's hard to tell if it's not been described. But we have seen some very rare things. We'll see something that doesn't really exist in one place. It's really like a more northern species. We'll see it to the south, or a southern species to the north. So yes, we have seen some.
How long have you guys been out there for?
So I've been out for almost 4 weeks now. I got on the ship in October, and then Lizzie and Tom back here got on the ship in the middle of October. They've been out for just over a week now.
Yep. So we're the newbies.
What is the deadliest sea creature you've encountered?
Ooh, the
What?
deadliest sea
The
creature we've
deadliest.
encountered. We've seen a lot of jellyfish up in the surface water, and those can be pretty deadly. And then down on the bottom, I would say some of the dogfish, which are kind of shark, and some of the rays.
Stand by for another question here. We got a lot of hands up.
Can we see any pictures of the sharks you've encountered or videos?
You could have seen them back when we, what was that? About 2 weeks ago when we were up north and we saw the spiny dogfish sharks. They were on the video. I don't remember, or I haven't seen what is posted on the websites, so maybe we'll try to throw one up later today.
Yeah, I can look through some of the highlight photos from the first leg and see if I can't send any photos or make those publicly available.
Go ahead.
Can the Dumbo Octopus be other colors than orange that we saw?
Yes, it can. They do range from darker red to a kind of a lighter color, and there's actually about 4 to 5 species that fall into that group. And so depending on the species you have, they can have a different color. But orangish, kind of maybe a brown orange, a light orange is pretty much the most common color.
Okay, we know you guys are busy, so we have one more question for you before we sign off.
Have you seen any baby animals?
Yes.
We have. We've seen some juvenile rockfish that are probably 3 centimeters long that have just settled to the seafloor. We've seen some pretty small sea pens, but I guess I don't know if those were babies. Meredith, do you recall any other?
1 or 2 of them might be babies, but they also might be a different species. That's one of the reasons we collected them, so that we're going to have a friend at a museum take a look, and they'll tell us whether those were baby sea pens or whether they are a different species.
All right, I want to thank everybody who came today and everybody on Facebook that's watching. Let's give a big round of applause to the ship. Thank you guys so much. We've enjoyed spending time with you and want to wish you good luck and smooth sailing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You guys have a great day.